Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join us for the webinar this evening, which is being hosted by AHDB Beef and Lamb. My name's Liz Ford, and I'm a Knowledge Exchange Manager for Beef and Lamb within AHDB. I'm delighted to bring you tonight's webinar on understanding the halal sector. Our presenter this evening is Awal Fuseini. Awal is the halal sector manager at AHDB, and he has a background in meat science and animal welfare. Prior to joining AHDB, Awal worked for the Halal Food Authority as their certification manager. He is currently completing his PhD at the University of Bristol. The plan of action for this evening is that Awal will take you through a 35-minute presentation, and then there will be time for some questions at the end. You will be muted throughout the webinar, but if anyone would like to ask a question, or at any time throughout the presentation if you think of a question, then please type it into the box on the right-hand side of your screen. When Awal has finished presenting, I will then ask him those questions. Hopefully, we won't encounter any technical difficulties tonight, but please bear with us if there are any. So without further delay, I'll hand over to Awal for this evening's webinar.
Thank you very much, Liz, for your kind introduction. Well, I would like to welcome everybody to this evening's webinar on understanding the halal market. The essence of the talk is just to highlight the significance of the halal market to our farmers and also to anybody who may be joining us outside the farming fraternity. So, as Liz said, my name is Awal Fuseini. I'm the halal sector manager of AHDB. So just a little bit about myself, just a little bit background about me. That's my picture there. In case you haven't met me or you just want to see how the voice puts a face to the voice. Yeah, that's me there. So my background, I've done my first degree was in agriculture, which is Bachelor of Science. I proceeded to do the master's in meat science from Bristol. And I'm also just finishing my PhD, during which we've developed a new system of stunning adult cattle. So hopefully we'll be able to improve the welfare of animals during slaughter. I'm also a member of the British Veterinary Association's Welfare at Slaughter Committee. We meet in London very often to discuss efforts or ways to improve the welfare of animals at slaughter. I also do some teaching at Bristol University in the Senior Animal Welfare Officer course that is run at Bristol. I do review papers for scientific journals, and I've published widely in a number of scientific journals. As Liz said before, I've got a background in halal certification. I previously worked in halal certification before joining AHDB. So that's a bit about me. So tonight we're gonna cover a few things about halal. So the first thing we'll look at is we'll try to define halal, to look at what halal really means. We look at the legislation governing halal, the value of the domestic market, the value of the EU market, and opportunities outside the EU. We also look at what AHDB is doing to develop the market. So let's look at what the halal is going on. I think any of us watching this program will have a view about halal, whether it's positive or it may be negative. It's just the way halal is. However, some of the information we find online in the media and other places may not be accurate representation of what halal really is. And it's for this reason that today I'm here to try to explain what halal really is, and also try to demystify some of the myths surrounding halal. So what is halal? Halal is simply an Arabic word which means anything that is permissible. However, when you hear halal in the UK or in the media, we normally associate it to meat or food. However, halal extends more than that. It's a holistic term that means that covers the way Muslims do business transactions, the way they prepare their food, or even the way they marry. So that is just halal. So it's not just about food, but it covers other aspects of the life of Muslims. So let's look at the requirements. When you're looking at the requirements of halal slaughter or halal meat production, there are three key elements you need to consider. The first one is the animal you are slaughtering. The second is the person slaughtering the animal. And the third, but not the least, is the knife you're using to slaughter the animal. So first of all, let's look at the animal you're slaughtering. Muslims derive their laws, their dietary laws from the Holy Scriptures, from the Scriptures, which is the Quran and other Scriptures. These Scriptures tell or command Muslims to eat only certain animals. So we call those, we classify them as permissible animals. For instance, commonly pigs or pork cannot be consumed by Muslims. So if you're looking at going into the halal trade, into the halal market, you need to ask yourself certain questions as to whether the animals you're considering to slaughter are permissible for Muslims to consume. The next important bit regarding the animal is that the animal must be slaughtered whilst it is alive. This is one area that has divided opinion within the Muslim community. The scriptures tell Muslims to slaughter animals whilst they are alive, but it's normally confused with animals being conscious or unconscious. For instance, you can stun an animal and the animal is still alive, or you can stun an animal and kill the animal. So what some Muslims are saying is that some stunning methods that do not lead to the death of the animal before exsanguination or before bleeding are acceptable, whilst others say because the Quran says the animal must be alive, an unconscious animal may not be alive. So because of this, some Muslims will not accept stunning. If we look at the person bleeding the animal, this has also created a sort of debate within the Muslim community. The Quran or the Holy Book is telling Muslims to eat meat that is slaughtered by people of the book. People of the book are Christians and Jews and Muslims as well. However, some Muslims, or generally Muslims or halal certification bodies, will only insist on the slaughter to be done by a Muslim. That is up to the certifiers to decide, but there are other certifiers who accept slaughter that is done by Christians and Jews. Another important element of the slaughterer is that the person must recite a short prayer. And the short prayer, when I say short prayer, I really mean short prayer. All you say is in the name of God. The reason for that is that you are acknowledging the fact that the animal, the life of the animal you are taking was created by God, and you are just acknowledging the fact that you're going to kill the animal. So you're going to take the life of an animal that is created by somebody. So you're acknowledging the significance of the creation. The last but not the least, the person who is slaughtering must hold a COC or certificate of competence. So that is with the person bleeding. The knife, as we already know, the knife must be sharp and it must be long enough so that you can do a clean swipe or a clean cut of the neck without any interruptions. So let's look at legislation. First of all, we look at the European regulation, which is EC 1099/2009. As long as we remain in the EU, this will be applicable. So what does it say about halal slaughter or about religious slaughter? The European legislation says if you are slaughtering in accordance with any prescribed or particular religious rites, the requirements of paragraph 1 shall not apply. And what is paragraph 1? Paragraph 1 is stunning of animals. What it's telling us is that when you're doing halal or kosher, which are the two important religious slaughter methods, you are exempt from stunning. However, as we go along, you realize that although Muslims are exempt from stunning, the majority of animals slaughtered for the halal market is actually stunned. If we take beef, for instance, 99% of beef is stunned for the halal market. That is data from the Food Standards Agency that was released just 2 months ago. So although the EC regulation exempts Muslims from stunning, the majority of halal meat is actually stunned. And if we move back to the domestic legislation, which is the welfare of animals at the time of killing, WATOC 2015, it says that when killing in accordance with religious right, what it means is that you are killing without the inflicting of unnecessary pain. I don't know how that is possible, to kill an animal without the infliction of pain. Pain is something you cannot avoid during slaughter, whether you are stunning the animal or you are not stunning the animal, because the restraint itself is a painful and stressful process. So what this one is saying is a very clever legislation that says unnecessary pain or unnecessary suffering. So some of the suffering is what is clearly telling us is that some of them cannot be avoided. So whilst others can be. So if you can, please try and avoid it when you're slaughtering for halal. So that is the legislation. Now let's move on to the opportunities in the domestic market for halal. To look at this, we need to have a picture of the number of Muslims or the population of Muslims in the UK. And I'm looking at data from the Office of National Statistics that was done in 2011, in the 2011 census. In England and Wales, the Muslim population accounts for 5% of the population. However, the interesting bit of it is that this 5%, we can break it down. And if we break it down, you realize that 48% of the 5% are less than 25 years. If we go a step further, 88% of the Muslims are less than 50 years. What this is telling us is that the Muslim population is a relatively younger population compared to the general UK population. And there are studies that has confirmed that these guys, when I say these guys, I'm also a Muslim, these guys have got higher disposable income than their fathers and their great grandfathers. They tend to be more educated or better educated than their fathers. So opportunities to work is improved and to make more money is improved. And because Muslims consume more meat and they have larger disposable income, they tend to consume a lot of meat. So let's look at the consumption of meat. The 5% I mentioned before account for 20% of the consumption of sheep meat in the UK. So 5% of the population consuming 20% of sheep meat. That tells us that the Muslim population consume above average than the general UK population. So it is huge, consumption is huge, and it's a market we need to pay attention to. These are interesting figures I also obtained from the Food Standards Agency. I want you to pay attention to the sheep, to the proportion of animals or sheep slaughtered, which is the middle statistic. 71% of sheep slaughter in the whole of UK is done according to the halal rules. If you consider this, the fact that in the UK we slaughter or we produce 14 to 15 million sheep in a year, 71% of the 14 million is slaughtered for the halal market. That is hugely significant. So it is a market you and I can no longer ignore. You farmers cannot ignore, the retailers cannot ignore. That is why now if you go to Tesco's, Asda's, and any of the retailers, you see halal meat occupying almost a full aisle. The reason is They know the market is growing. Nobody can ignore it. So, and if you look at goats, 63% of goats were slaughtered for the halal market. Cattle is very strange. Only 3% is slaughtered according to the halal market. One of the reasons for this is that cattle is normally slaughtered or is normally stunned with what we call penetrative captive bull stunning. Penetrative captive bull stunning is likely to kill animals before you slaughter. So the majority of Muslims wouldn't accept it because they are not allowed to eat meat from animals that die before slaughter. So that is one of the reasons why cattle slaughter or the consumption of beef meat is relatively down compared to the other species. And if we take a look at the culled EU market, as farmers, without the halal market, your culled you would have struggled to get rid of use. So the halal market underpins the EU trade. If you want to test this principle, go to Tesco's or any of the big retailers, Sainsbury's, Asda's, and all the big guys. Look for any mutton product on their own brand, on their label. You will struggle to find any. But walk down on the street and go into any halal butchery. You realize that the majority of the meat there will be mutton. The reason for the consumption of mutton, for the relatively higher consumption of mutton, is that the Muslims are able to process it into different forms. They use it for curries, where usually the flavor is very the flavor of the meat is not important. The texture of the meat is not important just because of the way it's processed. So the EU market, as I said, the halal sector is very important to that. So there are some important festivals I want us to have a quick glance at. How are we doing with time? 18 minutes. So important markets, Ramadan. Ramadan is a period of fasting, and there is evidence that meat consumption goes up during Ramadan. Muslims they abstain from eating food from dawn till dusk. So about 18 hours, Muslims abstain from eating any form of food. So when they break their fast at the end of the day, they do take in a lot of proteins. That is why meat consumption goes up during fasting or during the period of Ramadan. There is also a festival called Eid. It happens a day after Ramadan. It's a day to celebrate the end of Ramadan, where Muslims eat a lot of meat during that festival. So meat consumption tend to go up. One of the most important festivals is what is called Eid al-Adha, which is the second Eid. During that Eid, every Muslim who is able to afford is enjoined or is commanded to pay for an animal to be slaughtered. So what they do is they go to an abattoir, they pay the abattoir whatever it will cost for an animal to be slaughtered on their behalf. Each Muslim who is able to afford it is supposed to do it. If you want to see how this impacts on our throughputs in the UK, have a look at throughputs for last year's August. You realize that in August, the total throughput went right up there because of the Ramadan period. So now let's turn our attention to Europe. Assuming Brexit is still delayed and also tariffs are not put on our products and we are still able to export to Europe, what are the opportunities available? We know that 35% to 40% of UK products are exported to the single market. This is just conventional and halal. And now if we narrow it down to halal, the two biggest markets for halal are Germany and France. I was recently in France to exhibit UK halal products, and you could see that people associate UK or British meat with grass-fed and natural sort of products and high quality products. So our products are very famous in France and Germany. Hopefully, the politicians can strike a deal and our products will continue to go to Europe. So let's look at the global picture. Muslims spend $1.1 trillion on food alone. That was a statistic, that was a data that was published in 2014. This is projected to rise to 1.6 trillion by the year 2020, that is next year. So that is just again highlighting the fact that the halal market is huge. We have the domestic market here, we have the European market, and we have the opportunity to tap into the global markets. And these are some interesting figures. There are 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. The projections are that the population is younger and is continued to be younger. By 2030. It's estimated that 29% of 15 to 29-year-olds will be Muslims. That is huge. That is a very young population with high disposable income who continue to eat meat. So we cannot ignore the halal market. And I've given you some data on top there of the Muslim majority, the population of the Muslim majority countries where we can export British products. This is an interesting data I obtained. I've just actually picked it up from one of the studies that were published recently by Pew Research Center. If you look at the export of live animals, Brazil is one of the top exporters of live animals. And if you look at the destinations, we've got Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Malaysia, and Iraq. The reason why I brought this slide up is recently I was contacted by some buyers from Dubai who wanted to buy live animals from the UK. However, I'm well aware about the welfare implications and the restrictions around the export of live animals, but that is just food for thought. And in terms of consumption, Malaysia tops it. But if you look at export to Malaysia, it's only the Australians and the New Zealanders who are there. Very little UK meat is exported to Indonesia. These are markets we definitely need to look at developing for our farmers, our abattoir operators, and our meat processors. Another one gives a snapshot of the export of products to the Middle East, and it shows that Australia is already exporting a lot to the Middle East. And we know that 90% of their beef and lamb is imported or is exported from countries like New Zealand and Australia. So these are markets we definitely need to consider looking at. So now I'm just going to, we've had a look at the opportunities, the size of the market, the population, and all that. So what is AHDB doing to develop the market? So I'm just gonna take you through all the activities we are involved in order to develop the market. We've got a number of lamb promotional campaigns that are going on, aimed at the Muslim consumer, just to entice them, just to encourage them to use lamb as a versatile and robust product, and also as a convenient product. So one of the promotional activities we did, or the campaigns we did, was recruiting some Muslim chefs and social influencers to do a number of recipes. We then created a content with these recipes, which were broadcasted on British Muslim TV channels. These are channels that you can access the Muslim population. So this is one of the biggest activities we did to promote lamb to the Muslim community. Another one we did was we got some Muslims who have got huge social media followings. They created some dishes with recipes that we provided to them. They then shared it with their followers on social media, Twitter, YouTube, and other platforms, just to encourage people, just to encourage the younger Muslims to be able to try different dishes with lamb, and also to sell lamb as a versatile, as a high quality product to their followers. Another thing we do is there are a number of Muslim expos in the UK and abroad. So what we do is those on the pictures on the pictures on the left shows Martin and my colleague Dennis. What we do is we take them to these events. Martin will do butchery demonstration of how to utilize carcasses into modern cuts. Then Denise will demonstrate how to cook it. So these events prove to be very popular within to the younger Muslims. So they seem to patronize it. So we keep doing this at least 2-3 times a year, just to make sure we keep consumers on their toes. The other thing I do is I've got a stakeholder group within the Muslim community made up of abattoir operators, farmers, halal certification bodies, and Islamic scholars. So what I do is I take them to farms to interact with farmers, to understand what husbandry practices happen on farm, to ask questions about feeding, to ask questions about any husbandry practices that they believe may not be consistent with halal, with the rules of halal. We also produce this poster on the right to distribute to all markets in England, so that the marketeers, farmers, and auctioneers understand the significance of the halal market, and also get to understand some of the festivals, some of the important festivals in the Muslim community. I also collaborate with halal certifiers to understand what the requirements are, so that we can translate this for abattoir operators to be able to understand and implement, so as to comply with the requirements of halal. So let me just go through some of the things we're doing in AHDB. We've conducted research into a halal compliant method of stunning adult cattle, so that, as I said earlier, the majority of halal beef is stunned with penetrative captive bolt. Many Muslims do not recognize penetrative captive bolt as a halal compliant procedure. So what we need to do is we need to keep researching into new methods, so that we will find a method that is compatible with their beliefs. We also encourage best practice through the training of slaughter operatives. We haven't started this yet, but it's something we are planning to do. As you know, there's been time and time again where there've been covert recording of halal slaughtermen, or even non-halal slaughtermen, abusing animals. These are things we don't want to see. These are things we need to improve. So we're planning a training program for halal operatives. We hold regular conferences and halal stakeholder meetings. As I said, we organize farm visits to halal stakeholders. We produce an important video, which I will encourage you to have a look at if you've got the time. It's an educational video on the different halal slaughter methods. It is very useful. It explains slaughter with stunning and slaughter without stunning. So if you have time to have a look at the YouTube video, you will find this very useful video. There are also some important resources you can find. And also on our trade website, the QSM Beef and Lamb website, if you visit, there are some important resources that are important to both the halal and the non-halal markets. So I think that we've come to the end of it. I've left my email there. If you want to have any question addressed that we're not able to address today, you can get in touch with me on this email. So I'll try as much as I can to answer all your questions. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Chloe or Liz so that they will take the questions for us to go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Awal. That's great presentation. Just whilst we're waiting for some questions to come in, so the question panel is on the right-hand side of your screen, so please do type any questions in there. But whilst we're waiting for some questions, just to remind you that the presentation has been recorded and it will be available on the AHDB YouTube channels. Shortly, you will get a link or an email to tell you when that's been loaded. So we've got a couple of questions to start with. So I think the first one, are AHDB working with the sector to try and increase the amount of meat which is stunned?
Well, what we're trying to do is, as you know, we take levies from both the stun and non-stun sector. So we do support both sectors. But in terms of creating an understanding of stunning, we have done a bit there. We've done a lot of work there to improve understanding and maybe acceptance of stunning within the Muslim community. For instance, some Muslims are not comfortable that stunning is compatible with halal. So we need to take our time and explain the different methods of stunning to them and say, look, there are some stunning methods that wouldn't kill the animal, and some Muslims will accept it. So if they have a good understanding that some methods will not kill the animal before bleeding, there will be an increase in acceptance of stunning.
Okay, that's great. Another question, what is the difference between stunned halal and conventional slaughter?
There is no, well, in terms of the welfare element of slaughter, there is no difference between stunned halal slaughter and conventional slaughter, because most of our animals are stunned halal with methods that has been scientifically validated to be humane before they are approved for slaughter. So any halal slaughter in terms of welfare are consistent or are at the same level in terms of humaneness. The only difference between stunned halal slaughter and conventional slaughter will just be the fact that a prayer is said before halal slaughter. But in terms of welfare, there is no difference between the humaneness of halal slaughter and conventional slaughter.
Okay, great. Thanks, Awal. And another question on that sort of subject is, which method of stunning is acceptable to halal?
Yeah, it depends on which animals we're talking about. Let's take sheep, for instance, or all small ruminants. If we take small ruminants, the commonest method of stunning is head-only stunning. However, we've also got head-to-body stunning, and we've got mechanical stunning. Head-to-body stunning, the essence of head-to-body stunning is to stun at the animal first and then apply some current to the heart to stop the heart from functioning. That method is not accepted for halal because when you stop the heart, you are likely to kill the animal. Blood can no longer move from the heart to the brain. And if the brain is deprived of blood, the animal will die. So that method is not consistent with halal. Also, mechanical stunning. When you stun with mechanical device, you penetrate the skull of the animal to destroy the brain. And when you destroy the brain, there is the possibility that the animal will not recover. The animal may die before the neck is cut. So that method too is not acceptable for halal. The last method is head only. Head only, you only apply electricity to the brain to knock the animal unconscious. That method of stunning doesn't cause instantaneous death of the animal. So that is accepted by the Muslim community. And if we go to large ruminants, it's the same thing. It's mechanical, head only, or head to body stunning. Only head only stunning is compatible to halal because it doesn't kill.
Okay, thank you. And we've had a very similar question as well from somebody else, but just added on that would Muslims agree with this? And I think you've possibly covered that anyway in the part of the presentation, but if you want to just cover that off again.
That will most Muslims agree with
Agree
what?
with stunning prior
Okay,
to.
okay. In 2017, I conducted research in the UK, which was published in Mid Science Journal. What we did was we interviewed Islamic scholars across the UK. So when we started the interviews, the first question we asked them was, do you think stunning is compatible with halal? 80% of them said no, they do not think stunning is compatible with halal. That was the first question. But when we rephrased the question and said, okay, if an animal is stunned and the animal is not dead before the neck is cut, would you recognize that as halal? 95% of them said yes, they will recognize stunning as halal on condition that the animal is alive at slaughter. So the difficulty we have now is we need to, as an organization, AHDB, or as an industry, the meat industry, to be able to interact with the Muslim community, to be able to explain to them that there are some stunning methods that do not cause instantaneous death. If possible, invite them to abattoirs to demonstrate to them that such methods do exist. If we can do that, that can change the minds of some Muslims.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And then another question, is there a particular sheep carcass spec for halal that is in the main demand?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Is there a particular carcass specification that's required for the halal trade?
It depends on the festival. As I said, during the second Eid I was talking about, each Muslim is asked to slaughter an animal. Surprisingly, you may feel, oh, fatty animals may not, or fatty carcasses may not be in good demand. But during that festival, they are encouraged to slaughter animals that are fatty. So it depends on the festival and also on the season of the year. So they don't have specific carcass requirement, but during the festival I was just talking about, which is called Kurbani, they do require that the animal should be fatter.
Okay, that's interesting. And would that be similar for the export trade as well?
No, export will be different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we've had a couple of questions on the export trade in terms of why do we not export chilled lamb instead of live exports or live animals?
Yeah,
I think that was
do.
related to this slide on the research one that you showed.
Yeah, we do export chilled products to the Muslim markets. But the reason why I brought up that slide was that there is an opportunity for live export. However, there are, as I mentioned, there are welfare aspects of it which we carefully need to consider, and there are other legislative barriers farmers may have to go through. I'll give you an example. The guys who contacted me from Dubai, they said, look, if we come in to buy a car for, if we're selling a carcass in Dubai, maybe it will be $200, but a live animal in Dubai can sell over £1,000. So there is sort of value in it, but I'm not trying to promote it. I'm just highlighting the fact that there is that element. The Australians, the Brazilians, and all that, they are doing it, but it's not. I'm not trying to encourage it. I understand the welfare element of it, but it is something I just wanted to bring to your attention.
Okay, thanks. And I think from an AHDB point of view, obviously we the levy's raised at point of slaughter here, so for our benefit, it
Yeah,
works in our favour at the moment. But anyway,
yeah.
Just another question. Are there any initiatives to better educate veterinary surgeons on halal, as they seem to be quite vocal with perhaps limited knowledge?
Yes. That's a very what I try to do is I try to go to to attend conferences to speak about the welfare aspects of halal, the fact that halal is stunned, but the information we have in the media is that when they're talking about halal, they put it as if no, halal is not stunned at all. So I, as I said, teach on the senior animal welfare officer course in Bristol, where I highlight the fact that stunning is acceptable. Stunning is done for halal. The majority of halal meat is from stunned animals anyway. So those are the things, the efforts we're doing. But I think we need to do more, and I believe universities need to do more when they are training vets to be able to educate them that, look, this is the situation. What you hear in the media is completely different from what you hearing now. And just to add to that, we recently conducted research. We surveyed veterinary students in 4 universities in England, and you'll be surprised that even some of the vets do not believe that stunning abolishes pain. They do not believe stunning abolishes pain at all. So these are challenges veterinary universities need to look at. But I am always available. If people want me to come and talk, I will go and explain what I know to them. Yeah.
Okay, great. And another question, I'm just going to paraphrase it because it is quite long, but the person asking the question lives in a fairly remote area where there are a few Muslims, but around him or around the person, there are a few Indian restaurants which are serving halal meat. How can they be sure when they visit somewhere that the meat is pre-stunned or not?
It's difficult. What you need to do is you can ask the restaurant for the EC code or EC number of the abattoir that supplies the meat. If you have a knowledge of the EC code, I'm sure you can go onto the FSA's website to check which abattoir it is. And once you know the abattoir, it's easy to confirm whether they stun or they do not stun.
Okay, that's great. And then another question is, how can we improve the slaughtering of cattle in the UK to conform with halal conditions?
Well, as I said, one of the reasons why consumption of beef is very low in the UK is because of the slaughter method. The slaughter method is penetrative captive bolt, and if you look at all the halal authorities globally, none of them accepts penetrative captive bull stunning. So the only way we can encourage or increase the consumption of beef in the UK is to be able to research into different methods. My research in Bristol has resulted in the production of a prototype stunner, We haven't commercialized it yet, but there are signs that stunning is an electrical stunning may be accepted by the Muslim community. So that is one avenue we are looking at, but maybe some other researchers are working on other systems. But the system we've produced in Bristol is working, but we haven't commercialized it yet.
Okay, thank you. And another question, the person asking said they may have missed it, but could we clarify the portion of sheep meat halal stunned and not stunned?
Okay. Yeah, well, the proportion of sheep meat slaughtered for the halal sector is 71% of the total production in the UK. This data is reliable because it's from the Food Standards Agency, and that was published 2 months ago. Now, if you take the 71% that is slaughtered for the halal market, I'm just talking about sheep meat now, 25% of the 75% wouldn't be stunned. So 25% of small ruminants will not be stunned. Now take cattle, and only 3% of cattle is slaughtered for the halal market. However, out of the 3%, 99% of it will be stunned with captive bull stunners. But the majority of Muslims will not consume that meat because they do not recognize it as halal compatible. I hope it's clear.
Okay, I think so, touch wood. Then another question in terms of opportunities really going forward and looking at the third countries, you mentioned opportunities to expand there. What sort of timescales would it take to get into these markets?
We do get people coming in all the time. I take visitors from outside the UK to abattoirs to have a look at. It wouldn't take long because we already complying with the requirements anyway. The likes of UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, all the major Muslim countries or the big halal markets already accept the system of slaughter we use in the UK. So it's just a matter of finding buyers in those countries. And what we're doing at AHDB is we attend Gulf Food, which is the biggest the biggest halal expo, meat expo in the Gulf region. We attend it every year to showcase British products, British lamb and beef. So these are things we're doing, but I don't think it will take long. We already complying with the requirements. We got access to the markets. It's just a matter of finding the right buyers.
Okay, thank you. And then in another question that we've got, you mentioned about the younger population of Muslims. Do you think that that will change the demand for the type of products that they're looking for going forward?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if many of you have been to a traditional halal butcher. If you go to a traditional halal butcher, all they do is they get the carcass and they chop it into pieces. There is no order to the butchering process. Now, the younger population are now asking for certain type of cuts. So they are more versatile. They're trying to eat more British, more modern meat rather than just chop meat into pieces, which is something their fathers and grandfathers were used to, but their lifestyles are changing. The other thing is they don't want to go to the kitchen and spend 2 hours in the kitchen, which their fathers and grandfathers were happy with. They want to get to the kitchen and spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes to prepare their food. So we need to be able to translate to teach halal butchers how to do these modern cuts so that the younger population will be able to consume more meat. So their lifestyles are different from the older generation.
Oh, that's great, thank you. And another question that we've just got in is there work being done to ensure that the UK population is better educated about what halal is? There are many misconceptions around labelling, stunning, etc.
I'm not sure of any formal educational effort that is being done targeting the general population, but many people I speak to when I visit, whether when I'm talking to farmers, when I'm talking to ordinary consumers, I ask them where they normally get their information about halal, and many of them get it from YouTube, from social media, which does not present an accurate representation of what halal really is, because social media want you to believe that all halal is barbaric, all animals are slaughtered with a stunning, it's a ritualistic process which we don't want in Britain. But as farmers and as food business operators, we cannot ignore the halal market. If we say we don't want to do halal, then mutton, we may have to pay, farmers will have to pay for people to come and get their mutton away. You can't get the market for it. The halal market underpins the mutton trade. So it is a market. We need to educate people, but I don't think there is a formal educational drive going on.
Okay, thank you. And then another question, is it true all New Zealand lamb is halal?
I was in New Zealand recently, and I think not all, but 95 to 99% of it will be halal, but all of it is stunned. So if your question is regarding welfare, then your fears will be put down because all the animals will be stunned. But if you are somebody who don't want to eat halal at all, just for political or personal reasons, then it's something you have to consider. But in terms of welfare, all the animals in New Zealand, all the halal animals are stunned, and 95 to 95%, 95 to 99% of New Zealand products will be stunned halal.
Great, thank you. And then another question that we've got is this producer doesn't agree with non-stun slaughter. When animals are stunned, I've heard it's a recoverable stun while a prayer is said. How is this acceptable for the welfare of the animal?
Yeah, so the way I understand the question is the person is asking whether halal stunning is humane. Is that correct?
Yes, it'll be along those veins, yes.
Okay. Recoverable stunning, as I said, I explained the three methods of stunning. The recoverable stunning, all it means is that you only apply current to the brain. And when you apply current to the brain, you induce what is called grand mal epilepsy. It's too technical, so I don't want to go into it. So when you do that, when you disrupt the brain function with electricity, it knocks the animal unconscious, and that duration of unconsciousness can last up to 55 seconds. So what it means is that if you stun the animal and you're able to cut the neck of the animal, for instance, sheep, if we take sheep for instance, the sheep will lose consciousness between 4 seconds and 20 seconds. And by the time it reaches to 30 seconds, it would have lost sufficient blood to cause brain dysfunction. So when you stun the animal, as I said, it induces unconsciousness for up to 55 seconds. So within that 55 seconds, you should be able to bleed the animal and prevent recovery of the animal. So it is a humane process. Although it's recoverable or reversible, it is a humane process. And science has demonstrated that.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to producers, so you touched on the religious festivals. Is that time when demand for sheep meat is higher, and can farmers maximise if they're selling animals during that time? Can they maximise their input?
Absolutely, absolutely. You see, this is something I've been working with the NFU and other farmers on. During this second festival, prices of products or of animals go up because there is huge demand, and when there is demand, when there is huge demand, prices go up. However, the challenge we have there is that many Muslims prefer to slaughter lamb rather than sheep. And the minimum age, according to the requirements of the festival, is that the animal must be 6 months. It must be 6 months old. And if you consider the fact that many of our farmers will lamb in March and April, and the festival is in August, it is likely that by August, some of the animals will not be 6 months. So that is a challenge. So we're working with farmers to see how they will better understand the festival, finish their animals to coincide with it in order to maximize profits.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So it's worth watching out if you're producers for those festivals and seeing whether that's something that you can make use of. And I think that actually brings us, we're pretty much out of time now. So what I'll do is just to say thank you so much for the presentation, Awal. It was a brilliant presentation. Thank you very much for everyone for listening, and thank you very much for the questions. I realise it's a very emotive subject, so hopefully that's cleared some of the issues up. I'd like to remind you that the presentation has been recorded and it will be available on the AHDB YouTube channels along with the other previous webinars should you want to revisit it. So thank you very much again to everyone and have a great evening.